The first thing I remember is the light. Bright, sterile, cutting through my eyelids like a scalpel. I didn't remember falling asleep, or even the gurney ride, just a split second of darkness followed by that blinding white. My throat felt scraped raw, and my chest pulsed like it had taken a punch from something biblical. I blinked once, then again. And then I saw him. Lucas. My son. Standing over me with a grin so wide it didn't fit the room. "Hey, Dad," he said, voice too high, too bright. "Welcome back." There was something off about that smile. Not that it wasn't warm, it was too warm. It felt like the heat you get when you lean too close to a fire that's not yours. I tried to speak, but all I could manage was a dry rasp. My lips cracked at the effort. Lucas leaned in. "Don't try to talk yet. You've been under a while. Routine stuff, though. All good now." I closed my eyes again. My body wasn't mine yet. Every limb felt like it belonged to someone else, loaned out and returned poorly stitched together. Still, Lucas's presence, it should have been comforting. Should have meant something. But all I felt was weight. Not relief. Not joy. Just weight. The kind that settles in your gut when your instincts are trying to shout but your body hasn't caught up yet. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just the drugs. But something in me clocked that grin and didn't forget it. A week later, I was home. Recovery was slow, but manageable. The farmhouse was the same as it had always been, same squeaky stair, same hum of the old refrigerator, same creak of the back porch swing in the wind. And yet, everything felt slightly shifted. Like someone had come through while I was gone and rearranged things by an inch. Lucas was still around. Still smiling. Still too helpful. "Don't worry about the bills, Dad," he said one morning, flipping eggs in the skillet like he owned the stove. "I've got everything covered. You just focus on healing." He'd moved into the guest room. Brought in a few boxes. Said he wanted to help out around the house, cook, run errands, sort the mail. He even got me a new set of pajamas. A nice gesture, on the surface. But underneath? I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't charity. It was positioning. It wasn't until the call from Mabel Hartley that I understood just how deep the rot went. Mabel's been my lawyer for years. Sharp as a tack, old school, and allergic to nonsense. When her number popped up on my landline, I knew something was wrong before I even answered. "Harold," she said, wasting no time. "Just confirming the will revision you filed on June 14th. The hospital notarized it." I blinked. "What revision?" There was a pause. "The new version. The one where you disinherit Ella and leave everything to Lucas." My stomach turned so fast I thought I'd fall over. "Mabel," I said slowly, gripping the edge of the kitchen counter. "I didn't sign anything at the hospital. I was barely conscious." She sighed, paper rustling in the background. "Then we've got a problem. Because this document has your signature on it, dated 2 days after the surgery." My voice dropped to a whisper. "I want to see it. Now." I hung up before she could respond. Lucas was outside, raking leaves with a cigarette dangling from his mouth, humming some song like this was just a normal Saturday. I watched him through the window. My son. My blood. A thief, maybe. I didn't want to believe it. Not yet. Not fully. But that seed was planted now, and it wasn't going anywhere. The next morning, while Lucas was out getting groceries, I made a quiet call to someone I trusted more than most, Jean Delaney, childhood friend and probate clerk for the county. We'd grown up together, and though life had pulled us in different directions, she still made time for coffee once in a while. That afternoon, I sat across from her at her small kitchen table, steam rising from 2 mismatched mugs. She handed me a copy of the will, the revised one. Lucas's will, though it bore my name. I studied the signature. It was mine, and it wasn't. Close, but not exact. My H didn't curl like that. The slant was off, too smooth, like someone trying hard to copy my hand. You didn't sign this, Jean said flatly. No. I didn't. She flipped through the rest of the pages. Filed with the court 2 days after your surgery. Witnessed by a nurse I don't know, notarized by a hospital admin. I rubbed my temple. How the hell does this happen? Jean shook her head. People don't watch close enough. Especially when someone looks the part, grieving son, helping his father recover, all that. Ella didn't know, I said. She never would have stayed away if she knew what was happening. You've talked to her? Not since before the surgery. Lucas told her I was resting, recovering. Jean's lips pressed into a thin line. You want me to dig around? Quietly. I didn't hesitate. Yes. Quietly. She nodded. I'll start with the notary. See what I can find. I left her house with the copy of the forged will folded in my jacket pocket, heart pounding like I'd just discovered a bomb under my floorboards. Back at the farmhouse, Lucas was making dinner. Hey, you okay? He asked, eyes scanning my face. You look pale. I nodded. Just tired. He smiled that smile again. That wide, hollow grin. Get some rest, Dad. You've been through a lot. I walked past him and up the stairs to my room. Sat on the edge of the bed. Pulled the will from my pocket and stared at my own name on a document I didn't write. This was no mistake. It was a betrayal. Signed, sealed, and filed while I was unconscious. And I'd be damned if I let it stand. The first time I realized the house no longer belonged to me, I stepped on a drone. It was early, barely sunrise. I'd shuffled down to the front hallway in my robe and slippers to get the newspaper, like I had every morning since '92. Only this time, instead of the familiar creak of the floorboard by the door, I felt a crunch beneath my foot. Something whirred and sparked. A small black drone, no bigger than a dinner plate, lay twisted under my heel like a bug with broken wings. Lucas's voice echoed from the kitchen. Dad! Careful. That's part of Trevor's setup. Trevor. I didn't even know who Trevor was until 3 days ago. Apparently, he was a partner in Lucas's latest scheme, a logistics consultant with a background in crypto asset storage. What that meant, in plain English, was he took up space, made messes, and used my barn as his personal warehouse. The farmhouse, the one I'd lived in for 43 years, had transformed in a matter of weeks. Boxes lined the front hall. Laptops, printers, routers, gear I couldn't name but knew didn't belong, stacked in the parlor where my wife's piano used to sit. The kitchen table had become command central, as Lucas called it, covered in blueprints, sticky notes, and coffee mugs that never seemed to make it to the sink. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a startup company had moved in and fired the owner. Lucas called it rebranding the property. He was always throwing around words like that now. Property. Capital. Asset. The man who once asked me for gas money to take his prom date to Applebee's was now lecturing me about scaling operations. You've been sitting on this land for decades, Dad, he said, sweeping his arm out like some kind of prophet. 60 acres. Untapped potential. I'm talking passive income. Digital revenue streams. Lucas, I said slowly, this isn't a business. It's our home. Was our home, he corrected. But let's be honest, the market's changed. You're not farming it. You're not leasing it. Why let it rot? He said that in front of 2 of his friends and a girl I didn't recognize who had her boots on my coffee table. No one flinched. Not even when I clenched my jaw hard enough to make my teeth hurt. Later that day, I discovered the upstairs guest room, once Ella's old bedroom, had been rented out on some app I'd never heard of. A young couple from Chicago was staying the weekend, for the rural experience, paying Lucas a tidy fee to sleep beneath my roof and take selfies in front of the cornfield. When I confronted him, Lucas just waved it off. It's short-term. Helps with expenses. You're not using the room. I wanted to scream. Instead, I walked to the barn, the one my grandfather built with his own hands in 1912. I needed to be alone. I didn't make it inside. The door was padlocked. Big, shiny new hardware. Lucas is doing. I turned to find Reggie, another name in this endless rotation of freeloaders, walking up with a vape in his mouth and earbuds hanging around his neck. Hey, man, he said, like we were roommates. Lucas told me to keep the barn secure. We're staging inventory in there. Inventory. My tools. My shelves. My history. I want the key, I said. Reggie shrugged. Gotta ask Lucas. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in my bed, listening to the dull throb of bass from the garage, where another meeting was taking place. Lucas had started hosting these crypto gatherings, guys in hoodies talking about blockchains and digital wallets and investment syndicates. I heard my name once, followed by laughter. I wasn't just being pushed aside. I was being erased. The worst part? Ella still hadn't called. I'd tried her cell twice. No answer. Left voicemails. No reply. I couldn't shake the feeling that Lucas had something to do with that. When I asked about her, he was vague. She's been busy. Probably just wants to give you space while you're recovering. You're still pretty fragile. Fragile. I was fragile when I buried my wife and kept the family together. I was fragile when I dug up the broken water main last spring with my own 2 hands because no one else would. Fragile didn't mean stupid. But Lucas had all the angles covered. The mail was being rerouted to a P.O. box he controlled. The landline disconnected for simplicity. Even the Wi-Fi password had been changed. When I asked for it, he chuckled. You don't even use the internet, Dad. My world, the one I'd built, brick by brick, was slipping through my fingers, and Lucas stood at the center like a man who'd already won. Every step he took made him more confident. Every box he stacked in the hallway, every lock he changed, every stranger he introduced as a temporary tenant, was a nail in the coffin of my independence. I found the final straw in the laundry room. A printed flyer, Clearview Farm Co-op, now leasing storage units. Monthly rates. Long-term discounts available. With my address on it. My farm. My name. My land. Being sold off by the son who used to fall asleep on my shoulder during tractor rides. And that's when I knew this wasn't some misguided attempt to help. This wasn't temporary. Lucas wasn't playing house. He was staging a coup. The old man in the guest bedroom. That's what I'd become. He wanted me silent, seated, and eventually gone. But Lucas forgot one thing. I wasn't done yet. I didn't survive heart surgery, bury a wife, and build a life out of sweat and calluses just to hand it all over without a fight. If Ella wasn't answering, I'd go around him. I'd start small. A whisper here. A favor there. I had friends. Old ones. And if Lucas wanted a war, he just got one. The morning after I found the flyer, I didn't get out of bed right away. I sat there for nearly an hour, staring at the old window pane above the dresser, its glass warped from time and cold. You could see the south field from there, or what used to be the south field. Now it looked like a startup junkyard. Pallets stacked with boxes, some kind of pop-up tent with wires snaking underneath, and 2 guys pulling a tarp off something with blinking lights. From this angle, it was easy to forget that it was mine. That was the point, wasn't it? Lucas had turned my home into a business and me into an obstacle. And Ella? Still nothing. My calls had vanished into the void. I needed help. Not confrontation, not yet. Information. A quiet map of what he'd done behind my back. I needed Jean. I hadn't called her in years for anything more than a birthday card or a quick, "How are you?" after Sunday service. But she'd always been sharp, the kind of person who never missed a detail and didn't ask questions until she had all the facts. And she worked in probate now. County clerk's office. Which meant she'd know how deep Lucas had already dug his claws into my estate. I waited until the house emptied. Lucas had taken the truck, my truck, into town for a supply run, which probably meant more extension cords and energy drinks. I watched him pull out of the driveway, hoodie up, phone to his ear, looking like the boss of a tech company he never earned. I dialed Jean's number from the kitchen landline, the one Lucas thought he'd disconnected. He'd unplugged the wall jack, not realizing I'd routed it through the basement years ago after a storm blew out the front panel. He didn't know everything. The line clicked after 2 rings. "Delaney residence," came the familiar voice. "It's Harold." A pause. Then warmth. "Harold Kincaid. Lord, it's been a while." "Too long," I said. "You got a minute?" She did. 10 minutes later, I was sitting across from her in her sunroom, holding a mug of coffee that actually tasted like something. Her house smelled like lemon cleaner and old fabric, the scent of order, the opposite of what mine had become. She listened as I laid it out. The will. The new tenants. The flyer. Everything but the rage. That I kept folded up tight inside me. Jean didn't interrupt once. Just nodded, eyebrows rising only slightly when I got to the part about the will revision. "You're saying he filed it after your surgery?" she asked. 2 days after, I said. Mabel said it had my signature. Notarized. Witnessed. But I don't remember signing a damn thing. "You wouldn't," Jean replied. "You were on a morphine drip and couldn't sit upright, let alone sign legal documents." She leaned back in her chair. The sunlight caught in her graying hair, made her look almost golden. Then she stood, walked into her office, and returned with a thin file folder. "I pulled this when Mabel faxed over the revision," she said. "Didn't tell anyone. Figured you'd come knocking." She slid the document toward me. There it was. My name, scrawled in a signature that looked like mine but wasn't. It was close. Someone had studied it. Practiced. But they got one thing wrong. The tail of the H in Harold, I always looped it back under the name. This one didn't. It ended flat. Lazy. Sloppy, I muttered. Jean nodded. The notary was a nurse. We've used her for paperwork before. But the witness? She tapped the name. This is where it gets interesting. He's not hospital staff. He's freelance. Shows up on a few other documents we've flagged lately, usually involving elderly patients and emergency will adjustments. My jaw tightened. How many people has he done this to? Too many, she said. But none of them had your memory, or your temper. I sipped the coffee. My hand shook slightly. What are you thinking? Jean asked. I'm thinking I want to dig. Quietly. No courts yet. Just proof. A timeline. If I go at him now, he'll spin it. Make it sound like dementia. That I'm confused. He's already halfway convinced Ella I'm fragile. Jean nodded. I can trace property filings. Deeds, liens, trust transfers. We've got 6 months of public records backlog I can crawl through without raising suspicion. Good. And you? I looked out her window. The birds were fighting over the feeder. Pecking at each other between seeds. I'm going to do what I should have done weeks ago, I said. Start watching. Listening. Keeping notes. She smiled. You're building a case. I'm reclaiming my life. She stood and squeezed my shoulder. You're not alone, Harold. Don't let him isolate you. That's how they win. I left with the document in my coat pocket and a fire in my gut I hadn't felt in years. Back at the farmhouse, Lucas was lounging on the porch. My porch. His feet up on the rail like he owned it. He didn't even notice the file in my jacket or the way I looked at him like a puzzle I'd started to solve. Hey, you okay? He asked, peeling an orange with his thumbnail. You were gone a while. Just took a drive, I said. He nodded. Good. Fresh air's good for recovery. I smiled. Not the real kind. The kind you give someone right before they find out you've been 10 steps ahead of them the whole time. Because now. I had eyes. I had proof. And I had Jean. Lucas didn't know it yet, but the house he thought he'd taken, the land he thought he'd carved up like pie, was about to push back. And this time, I wasn't signing anything. I started with the desk. Not because I thought I'd find anything obvious there, but because that's where the lies usually begin, between old bills and forgotten receipts, tucked behind the things you meant to throw away but never did. The roll-top creaked like it hadn't been opened in years, though I'd used it every week before the surgery. Lucas had been in there. I could smell it. His brand of cologne, cheap and sharp, still clung to the wood. I pulled out the middle drawer and found the first clue. A manila envelope labeled insurance. Looked ordinary enough. Inside were hospital papers, some medical billing estimates, and right at the bottom, a single sheet with my signature at the bottom. Or what looked like my signature. Power of attorney. Dated 4 days post-surgery. The signature wobbled, leaned right, and looped in a way that mocked my actual handwriting. My thumbprint was on it too, faint but there, beside a notary stamp I didn't recognize. He buried it under insurance paperwork. Just deep enough that I wouldn't look. But not deep enough to hide it from a man who still remembered where every paperclip used to live. The next drawer held a checkbook. Not mine. A new one, drawn from an account I hadn't opened. My name on it, but I hadn't set foot in the bank in over a year. I checked the transaction ledger. Transfers. Wireouts. $7,000 to a crypto exchange I didn't recognize. $4,200 to Home Improvements, Barn Unit A. Unit A. That was what they were calling it now. I opened the filing cabinet next. The labels were all wrong. My system had always been alphabetical, color-coded, something I'd picked up from Margaret during her teaching days. Now it was chaos. Random folders with vague names. Utilities. Maintenance. Legal. That last one got me. Inside were 6 sheets of paper, printed emails between Lucas and someone named Kendall S. The subject line, Deed Transfer Logistics. I read them twice. Lucas had started the process of moving half the land into a holding LLC. One he named, Kincaid Future Holdings. Said he was consolidating assets for tax protection. Said I'd agreed in writing. Said I'd already signed. I hadn't. And then I saw it, an email dated the day after I came home from the hospital. Let's keep this quiet until the will clears. He's still foggy. Shouldn't be an issue. My stomach turned. I checked my email next. My personal account hadn't been opened in weeks, because Lucas had changed the password. I knew that now. I reset it using the old landline as my recovery point. Something he must have forgotten. Inside my inbox were notifications I never saw. Bank alerts. Account verifications. Even a life insurance policy confirmation. A brand new policy, $300,000 payout. Beneficiary, Lucas Kincaid. I wasn't angry yet. That would come later. First, I printed everything. I wanted a physical trail. If this went to court, I needed more than memory. I needed proof that bled ink. The printer whirred to life like it hadn't in months. Lucas must not have realized it still worked. Or maybe he thought I was too tired to check. Too old. Too slow. But I had all the time in the world now. With the papers printed and filed, I opened my phone, my old flip model, the one Lucas said made me look like I still lived in 2006. I scrolled through my call logs. The hospital. Mabel. Ella. 4 calls to Ella. All unanswered. I tried again. This time, she picked up. Dad? Her voice cracked, small and tired. Ella, I said, and my throat tightened around her name. You busy? No, she whispered. God, no. Dad, are you okay? Lucas said you were resting. That you needed space. I didn't ask for space, I said. I asked for my daughter. She broke then, soft tears on the other end. I didn't know. I called. He said you couldn't talk. I thought. I didn't know. I need you to come by, I said. Tonight, if you can. I'm already in the car. When she arrived, she didn't knock. Just walked in like she used to, when her mother was still baking pies and humming Patsy Cline in the kitchen. She looked older. Tired. But not broken. I handed her the stack of papers. Said nothing. Just watched her face shift as she read, anger building slow and quiet like a storm forming miles out to sea. He did this, she said. He's stealing from you. I nodded. And from you. We sat in the kitchen until long past midnight, the two of us and a pot of black coffee that tasted like memories. I showed her the documents. The false will. The power of attorney. The life insurance policy with his name written in ink like I'd already died. I can't believe this, she whispered. Lucas, he used to be. I know who he used to be, I said. But this? This is who he is now. She looked at me, eyes red. What do we do? We get smart, I said. We don't yell. We don't fight. We document. We prepare. Do you have a lawyer? Not yet. But I know someone who knows someone. I'll make the call. Ella squeezed my hand. You're not alone in this. No, I said, feeling the strength come back into my bones. Not anymore. We made a plan that night. To record conversations. To track money. To be invisible in our resistance until the moment came to strike. Lucas didn't know it, but the clock had started ticking. And the paper trail he left? It would lead him straight into a courtroom. It took me 3 hours to find the damn thing. The safe, I mean. I hadn't thought about it in years. Maybe more than a decade. It was tucked away behind an old cabinet in the attic crawlspace, a place only 2 people in the world ever knew about, me and Margaret. We bought it the same year Lucas turned 13, after he borrowed my checkbook and ordered $400 worth of video games from a mail catalog. Margaret didn't even yell. She just looked at me and said, maybe it's time we had a place for the things we really don't want to lose. So we bought a fireproof safe, heavy as sin, and tucked it away with a folding ladder and a vow never to mention it to the kids. And then, after she died, I forgot about it. Until now. Ella was downstairs, sorting through a stack of emails we printed from the account Lucas tried to hijack. Her face stayed calm, but her hands twitched every time she turned a page. I didn't blame her. Betrayal burns worse when it comes from blood. I climbed the attic stairs with a flashlight and a memory. The air was thick with dust and time. Boxes of Margaret's school records. Old Christmas ornaments. A baby crib neither of my kids ever claimed for their own children. I moved slow, knee aching with every step. But I moved. And there it was, behind the cabinet, beneath a mildew-stained tarp and a dead spider's web that had grown bold in the quiet. The safe. Black. Heavy. Unassuming. I wiped my hand across it and remembered the combination without thinking, Margaret's birthday, backward. My fingers turned the dial. A click, then a groan, and the door opened like an old secret coming back to life. Inside? Not much. But everything. The original will, the one Mabel helped draft a year after Margaret passed. Signed by both of us. Witnessed. Sealed. I pulled it out carefully. Set it aside. Then came the letters. Dozens of them. Some from Margaret to Ella. Some from me to Margaret, written on quiet nights after she'd gone to bed, the kind of letters men write when their words come easier in ink than air. And then the photos. Boxes of them. Polaroids. Glossy prints. One of Ella at age 6, holding a frog with both hands and grinning like a maniac. One of Margaret on our wedding day, barefoot in the grass because her shoes gave her blisters. One of Lucas, asleep on my chest, before the world convinced him he was owed something. At the very back of the safe, I found something I didn't expect, a cassette tape. Labeled in Margaret's handwriting. For when I'm gone, December 2008. I didn't remember this. Didn't remember her ever recording anything. I stared at it for a long time before slipping it into my pocket. I brought everything downstairs. Ella looked up as I entered, eyes widening at the stack of files in my arms. "What's that?" she asked. "Truth," I said. She helped me spread the contents across the dining table. The will alone made her gasp. She read every line like it was gospel. Her name was right there, co-executor. Co-owner of the farm. My successor. Lucas wasn't omitted, but he didn't hold majority. That had been the plan. Fair. Balanced. Honest. "Dad," Ella whispered, tracing her finger along her name. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I thought we had time," I said. "I didn't think your brother would pull this kind of stunt before I was in the ground." She looked like she might cry again. I didn't blame her. It wasn't just the documents. It was the realization that this whole thing had never been accidental. That Lucas had seen all of this, and decided to rewrite it. We made copies of everything. Scanned. Photographed. Uploaded to a cloud drive I never thought I'd need. She helped me label folders with names like Real Will and Evidence_OF_fraud. I watched her work, steady and fierce, and wondered how I ever let Lucas paint her as distant. She'd never stopped caring. She'd only been pushed out of the frame. I remembered the cassette in my pocket and pulled it out. "What's that?" she asked. "Your mother's voice," I said. We didn't have a cassette player anymore, not in the house. But Ella did what kids do, pulled out her phone, opened a second-hand app, and found an old player in someone's garage 2 towns over. We picked it up just before sunset. It still worked. We sat in the living room, lights off, cassette spinning. Margaret's voice filled the room, soft and deliberate. "If you're hearing this," she said, "then I've already gone. And I hope you're not sitting there being stubborn about it, Harold. You always were more comfortable fixing broken tractors than broken hearts." I laughed. Ella did too. A tear rolled down her cheek. "I recorded this," Margaret continued, "because I want something clear. If anything ever happens, this farm stays with Harold and Ella. They understand it. They live it. Lucas, he's got potential, but he's not rooted here. Not like you two." Ella covered her mouth. "I'm proud of you both," Margaret said. "But don't let anyone tell you who owns your story. Especially not someone who wasn't there when the fences needed mending." We let the tape play to the end. No music. Just silence. After, Ella whispered, "That's more binding than any will." I nodded. "And more true than anything Lucas has written." We sat in the quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel lonely. The kind that feels earned. I met Tobias Greer in the back room of a hardware store that also sold guns, garden tools, and bait. The kind of place where everyone knew your name if you'd lived in town long enough, or knew how to keep a secret if you hadn't. He wasn't cheap. But he wasn't flashy either. Wore a corduroy blazer with one missing button and glasses that made his eyes look 10% bigger than they were. But beneath that mild-mannered, almost bookish demeanor was a man who, according to Jean, had never lost a probate fight. Not once. Not when the paperwork was messy. Not when the opponent was family. Not even when the dying man had, in fact, died. "I don't just handle estates," Tobias said, laying his worn leather briefcase on the table between us. "I hunt fraud." Perfect. Ella sat beside me, arms crossed, face tight. She didn't trust easily, not anymore, but I could tell Tobias had her attention. I handed him a folder. Forged will. Forged power of attorney. Deed transfers, unauthorized tenants, new insurance policies. "And I think he's siphoning money from an account I never opened." He didn't even blink. "How's your health?" he asked, flipping through the papers. "Recovered from surgery," I said. "No mental impairment. No diagnosis. No drugs anymore. Just arthritis and age." "That's good," he said. "Judges don't like uncertainty when it comes to capacity. Any doctors willing to say you were incoherent or incapacitated when the changes were made?" "I've got discharge records," I said. "Jean's working on tracking the attending physician." But I was sedated, barely conscious. No way I signed anything willingly. He nodded slowly, eyes scanning the fake will. "And your daughter, Ella? She's co-executor on the original. Was cut out of the new version completely." "Convenient," he murmured. Tobias leaned back in his chair and tapped his pen against the table. "All right. First thing we do is revoke the power of attorney. Immediately. If he's accessing your accounts, we need to freeze everything he's touched. Then we file a petition to challenge the validity of the will in probate. If your signature doesn't match your historical records, I'll bring in a handwriting expert." "Can we prove it's forged?" Ella asked. "Easier than you think," Tobias said. "Everyone writes with rhythm. Forgeries look like they're written with hesitation, because they are. Most forgers stop to check each letter as they write. It shows up under magnification, you can see the stops and starts." He turned to me. "We'll also want a geriatric psychiatrist to testify you weren't in a position to understand or consent at the time of the signature. Not just because of the drugs, but because of the setting. Hospitals aren't legally friendly for will signing unless they're absolutely necessary." "And what about the tenants?" I asked. "That's the easy part," he said. "If the leases weren't signed by you directly, and you had no knowledge of them, they're invalid. We'll serve each occupant with notice to vacate within 30 days. If they resist, we file eviction proceedings." Ella looked relieved for the first time in weeks. I think hearing someone else say it, hearing it spoken plainly and legally, made it real. Tobias continued. "The land deeds? More complicated. If he moved part of the estate into an LLC, we'll need to untangle that, but if your signature on the transfer was also forged, it falls apart. We'll need to subpoena the notary and witness involved in all documents. Anyone who puts a pen to paper to lie on legal forms is fair game." I leaned forward. "And if he drained my accounts?" "Then we get it back," Tobias said simply. "But first, we stop the bleeding." He handed me a packet of forms. "Sign here. This revokes power of attorney and gives me legal access to begin the inquiry. Don't tell Lucas. Don't change the locks yet. Just observe." Let him think everything's fine. We want him relaxed. I signed. Slowly. Clearly. My real signature. By the time I got home, Ella and I had already made a list. People to watch. Items missing. Changes to the house we hadn't approved. I started taking photos of everything, timestamps on my phone, saved to a shared drive. Every tenant's car in the driveway. Every box of electronics in the barn. Every lease agreement I found tucked in drawers. Lucas was still playing the same game. Still cheerful. Still pretending he was the glue holding everything together. That night, he made dinner. Thought I'd try that lemon garlic chicken you used to like, he said, smiling as he set the plate in front of me. I looked at the food. Then at him. You know, I said, this house used to smell like your mother's cooking. Her sauce. Her pies. Now it smells like wires and server fans. Lucas laughed. We're modernizing, Dad. It's evolution. No, I said. It's rot. Covered in LED lights and buzzwords. He didn't respond. But the smile faded just enough. The next day, I met with Dr. Lillian Ortiz, a geriatric psychiatrist who owed Jean a favor. She reviewed my medical records from the hospital and agreed to a written statement. Post-surgical cognitive impairment is common, she said. Especially in older patients on sedation. You would not have been considered competent to sign anything binding. That afternoon, Tobias connected me with a handwriting expert. They compared the updated will to my historical checks, letters, and legal documents. I gave them everything, even the note I'd written to Ella on her 16th birthday, still folded inside an old Bible. 2 days later, the results came back. Forged. Clean as day. You've got enough to challenge the will, revoke the POA, and freeze any assets moved under fraudulent authority, Tobias said over the phone. Now we hit pause on his game. Ella and I went to the bank together. I walked up to the counter, old and slow, and asked to speak to the branch manager. When he came out, I slid the paperwork across the desk. This is my lawyer, I said. And I'm here to put a lock on every dollar in my name. Lucas didn't know it yet, but the accounts he'd been raiding just dried up. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. The game was still going. But now, I had teeth. The locks were the first thing to go. I changed them myself. Old hands, stiff with arthritis, fumbling through the cold brass parts on the front door, but I did it. Not because I needed to, but because it mattered that I did. That this house heard my hands working the bolts again. That it saw me stand upright, alone, screwdriver in hand, doing what fathers do when they've had enough of being stolen from. Lucas was out when it happened, off at another one of his networking events. Probably convincing other gullible 20-somethings that crypto was a religion and he was the prophet. I knew the pattern now. He left in the afternoons, came back with receipts paid from accounts that no longer worked. Tobias had made sure of that. The assets were frozen. The wells had dried. The machine, if you could call his grift a machine, was sputtering now. So I changed the locks. Front door. Back. Garage. Shed. Even the side gate. I posted a legal notice on the inside of the front window, just beside the old coat rack where Margaret's rain hat still hung. It read: Notice of revocation of access and rights to premises. Lucas Kincaid is hereby given 48 hours to vacate this property. Failure to comply will result in legal action. The moment I finished taping it up, I exhaled. Not relief. Not yet. But progress. Ella walked in an hour later with a bag of groceries and a bottle of red wine. She stopped when she saw the locks, then read the sign in the window. You really did it, she said, breathless. I said I would. She smiled, proud. He's going to lose it. I'm counting on it. We sat down at the table, my table, reclaimed, and ate together. Real food. No boxes. No plastic. Just roasted chicken, potatoes, and a salad the way Margaret used to make, lemon and vinegar sharp enough to wake the dead. For a while, the house felt alive again. Not haunted. Not overtaken. Just, mine. Then the door flew open. Lucas. Face red, shoulders heaving, keys dangling in his hand that no longer fit any door. What the hell is this? He barked, waving the notice like it personally insulted him. I stood up slow. Calm. It's called a boundary, I said. You remember those? You changed the locks. I did. You can't do that, he shouted. I live here. No, I said. You squatted here. You leeched off this place. And you're done. His eyes darted to Ella. You put him up to this? No, she said, not missing a beat. He's thinking for himself. Something you should try. Lucas laughed, loud and bitter. You think a piece of paper scares me? This is my house now. You signed it over. The will is changed. I held up another paper. This one from Tobias, signed, sealed, and filed. The will is under legal challenge, I said. You'll be hearing from the court within the week. And that power of attorney you abused? Revoked. His jaw clenched. I pressed on. The tenants are being served notices. The bank accounts are frozen. You've been cut off. He stepped closer. You don't know what you're doing, old man. I didn't flinch. I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm reclaiming what you thought was yours. You're going to regret this, he said through his teeth. You'll end up in a home. Alone. Better alone than surrounded by snakes. For a moment, it looked like he might take a swing. But then he saw Ella, standing behind me, tall, unshaken, her phone out, camera pointed straight at him. He stepped back. You want war, he hissed. Fine. Then he left. No slamming door. No threats. Just retreat. And I watched from the window as he realized every key in his pocket was now just a piece of metal. That night, Ella and I cleaned. Not because it needed it, but because it felt right. Like reclaiming territory with every wiped counter and swept floor. We opened the windows, let the fall air rush through. She put on an old record Margaret used to love, Louis Armstrong, Gravel and Gold. We found Reggie's things in the guest room. Gone. Guess he caught wind of the change and cleared out early. Good riddance. In the barn, the crypto rigs were still running, humming like an angry hive. We unplugged them one by one, stored the hardware in a corner, and shut off the breaker. The silence that followed was the sweetest sound I'd heard in months. The land, once buzzing with strangers and noise, fell quiet. Real quiet. The kind that comes with peace, not neglect. Ella slept in her old room that night. I walked the hall before bed, checking the locks like I used to when she was a teenager sneaking out with boys who drove too fast. For the first time in weeks, I turned off the lights myself. Because this house. It was mine again. Ella started in the attic. She always did things from the top down, even as a kid, cleaning her room from the ceiling fan to the floorboards, alphabetizing her books backward, fixing things starting from their source. She said it helped her feel in control. Now she was up there again, sorting through boxes that hadn't seen daylight since before Lucas lost his way. I stood at the foot of the stairs, holding a thermos of black coffee, listening to her boots scuff the floor above. The house creaked with her movement, not in protest, but like it was waking up from something. Like it was stretching after too long being forced to stay still. We saved everything, she called down. I climbed the steps slowly. My knee was barking, but I didn't care. When I reached the attic, I saw her standing beside a stack of boxes labeled, "Margaret, do not toss." Inside were decades of our life, newspaper clippings, school projects, dried flowers, and photo albums so worn at the edges they looked like they'd traveled through time. Ella held up a VHS tape with a faded label, Christmas 1997. She smiled. "This is the year Mom made that horrible meatloaf." "She never made meatloaf," I said. "She did that one time," Ella laughed. "It was supposed to be lasagna, but she forgot the noodles and improvised." I laughed, too. God, I'd forgotten that. Lucas was 6 that Christmas. He opened a toy train set and didn't stop playing with it for 3 straight days. Ella, 10 at the time, had made a picture frame out of popsicle sticks and glitter. I still had it on my desk until Lucas cleaned it out. We sat cross-legged on the attic floor and flipped through photo albums. Ella would pause at each one, her fingers tracing over her childhood face, her mother's smile, my younger self in overalls and a mustache that had no business existing. Then she found the DVD. No label. Just a white disc in a cracked jewel case. "What's this?" she asked. I didn't know. We brought it downstairs, popped it into the old DVD player I kept because I don't throw away things that still work. The screen lit up. It was Margaret. Sitting at the kitchen table, sunlight pouring through the window behind her. Her hair was tied back in a loose bun, and she wore that cardigan with the blue stitching she always said made her feel like a teacher, even though she'd retired by then. She was talking. "So if you're watching this," she said, "then something happened. Or maybe you're just feeling nostalgic, and if that's the case, hi, dummy." Ella gasped and laughed at once. Margaret continued, her voice soft but steady. "I'm recording this because I want there to be no confusion. No arguments. No questions about what matters. This house belongs to our family, to Harold and Ella. You two are the ones who understand it. Who respect it." She paused. "Lucas, he's got charm, sure. But charm doesn't fix fences. Charm doesn't plant tomatoes or mend quilts or remember to oil the porch swing." Ella sniffled beside me. "I'm not saying I don't love him," Margaret said. "But love doesn't mean trust. Not with something like this. This house is a promise. And I'm trusting you, Ella, to help your dad keep it." The video ended there. No grand goodbye. No dramatic music. Just static. I looked at Ella. Her face was wet with tears, but her back was straight. "She knew," Ella said. "She knew. Even then." I nodded. We didn't speak for a while. Just sat in the quiet. The kind of silence you sit in with someone you trust. Someone who's been through fire and didn't turn away. That afternoon, we started digitizing everything. Photos, letters, documents. The original will. Margaret's video. Even our new legal case files. Tobias had suggested we keep digital backups in case Lucas tried to challenge our claims in court or, worse, manipulate evidence. Ella handled the scanner like a pro, labeling every folder, cross-referencing names and dates. She even made a family archive with password protection. "Something we can pass down," she said. "When this is all over." It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about restoration. She found more footage, birthdays, graduations, camping trips. Each one like a puzzle piece she'd been denied for years. Lucas had taken our connection and hidden it under the guise of protecting Dad. But the truth was clearer now than ever, Ella had never stopped being part of this family. He just tried to write her out. That night, we sat on the porch, a new swing installed where the old one used to be. Ella found it at a local antique store and insisted on paying for it herself. Said it was time the house had something real again. She turned to me as the sun dipped behind the trees. "You know," she said, "I used to think Lucas just got lost. That maybe life hit him too hard, and he never learned how to bounce back. I didn't interrupt. But now. She exhaled. Now I think he chose this. The lies. The greed. The rewriting of everything we built. I nodded slowly. People don't change. They just get more confident being who they are. She leaned her head on my shoulder. We're gonna be okay, Dad. I looked out at the field, golden in the dusk light. The same one we'd planted a garden in back when Margaret still carried seeds in her apron pockets. We already are, I said. Because for the first time since my surgery, since the betrayal, I felt whole. Not because Lucas was gone. But because the one who stayed. She never stopped believing. I knew the message would come eventually. I just didn't think it would come as a GoFundMe. Ella found it first. She was scrolling through her phone while I stirred the soup on the stove. It had become our routine, a quiet dinner, some music on the record player, and then Ella showing me whatever nonsense Lucas was up to online. But this one stopped her cold. Dad, she said, holding the phone out to me, you need to see this. The page was titled, Help Me Save My Family's Farm, Victim of Elder Abuse. Underneath was a photo of Lucas, hair slicked back, standing in front of my barn with his arms folded like he was the last honest man on earth. The description read like something out of a bad drama. My aging father was manipulated into revoking my rightful inheritance. My sister, who was estranged for years, has returned and poisoned him against me. I was caring for him during a vulnerable time, managing the property, and now I've been forcibly removed from the home I was promised. Legal fees are mounting. I need help fighting this injustice. My blood boiled. The goal was $50,000. It already had $2,700, mostly small donations from people who didn't know the first damn thing about the truth. He's spinning it, Ella said, jaw tight. Making himself the victim. No surprise there, I muttered. He's always been good at theater. But it wasn't just the fundraising. It was the comments. Strangers calling us monsters. One woman even said she worked in elder care and saw stories like mine all the time. She told Lucas to stay strong and that justice always wins. The next morning, Tobias called. I assume you've seen it, he said. Just last night. We're drafting a cease and desist for defamation, he continued. But it gets better. Lucas filed an emergency injunction to halt the will challenge. On what grounds? Claims mental decline, Tobias said. He's citing your age, post-surgical confusion, and, get this, an inability to manage your affairs without supervision. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was pathetic. Let him try, I said. We've got paperwork. Doctors. Videos. Even handwriting analysts. I know, Tobias said, voice calm. But we still have to play it by the book. He's hoping we make a mistake. We wouldn't. The court date was set for 3 weeks out. In the meantime, Lucas had gone full campaign mode. He started posting videos from a motel room, giving updates like he was some grassroots politician. In one clip, he looked directly into the camera and said, "They kicked me out of my childhood home. I spent months taking care of my dad, feeding him, managing his meds, and this is how I'm repaid. With betrayal." I clicked pause. He never managed a single one of my meds. I wouldn't trust him to feed a goldfish. Ella shook her head. He's scrambling. But Tobias was right, we couldn't retaliate emotionally. Every move had to be calculated, cold, exact. Ella and I made a timeline, recovery, document forgeries, bank transactions, every signature, every withdrawal. We matched it all with hospital logs and voice memos from when I was incoherent. Tobias submitted them to the court. Then we found the texts. Lucas hadn't deleted his iCloud sync properly before giving up an old iPad to one of his business partners. That partner, a man named Shane, had grown tired of Lucas's broken promises and reached out to Tobias anonymously. Shane provided copies of texts that Lucas had sent during the peak of his scheme. Old man's out cold. Gonna get everything signed before he wakes up. Sis won't be a problem. She's gone soft. Thinks the farm is still a fairy tale. He won't even remember this. I'll have the land in my name before Christmas. We printed every one. At the pre-trial hearing, Tobias dropped the stack on the table like a gauntlet. Lucas showed up with a cheap suit and a lawyer who looked like he'd Googled estate fraud the night before. When the judge asked if Lucas had any proof of mental decline, his attorney stammered, "Just testimony and concern." Tobias smiled and pushed the folder forward. "We'd like to submit digital communications from the defendant, screenshots of banking activity under revoked power of attorney, and an affidavit from Dr. Lillian Ortiz confirming the plaintiff was medically unfit to sign binding legal documents at the time the revised will was allegedly executed." Lucas didn't speak. His face went pale. His mouth opened and closed like a man who suddenly forgot how to breathe. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Kincaid, do you contest the authenticity of these documents?" His lawyer asked for a recess. They didn't return. Later that night, the GoFundMe disappeared. Ella and I sat on the porch, a breeze moving through the trees. I sipped from a glass of bourbon, the good stuff, the bottle I'd been saving for something that felt like closure. Ella scrolled her phone and said, "You know what the best part is?" "What's that?" "He's quiet." And she was right. No videos. No tweets. No statements. Lucas had gone from martyr to ghost in less than 24 hours. I leaned back in the porch swing, closed my eyes, and listened to the silence he left behind. Not just the absence of noise, but the absence of lies. The morning the judge finalized the ruling, I didn't go to court. Not because I was avoiding it, Tobias was there, Ella too, but because I didn't need to see Lucas lose. I didn't need to hear the gavel drop or the clerk read the decision. I already knew what the paper would say. We had the truth. The law finally caught up to it. Instead, I woke early. Made coffee. Put on my boots. And walked the edge of the south field, same as I used to when Margaret was still alive. The grass was high and wet with dew, brushing against my legs like fingers tugging at the past. The sky was still gray, the sun just a promise behind the clouds, but the air was clean. Heavy with the scent of earth and memory. I walked past the old fence, the one I patched 23 times over the years, and out to the boundary line where the oaks rise tall and stubborn. That's where Margaret used to stop, hand on her hip, eyes scanning the horizon like she was trying to read the future in the tree line. I stood there a while, alone but not lonely. Back at the house, Ella was waiting at the kitchen table with a warm pot of coffee and a manila envelope from Tobias. "Want me to read it?" she asked. I shook my head. "I already know what it says." She handed it to me anyway. Court of Probate, State of Kentucky. Final judgment, revocation of fraudulent will and restoration of original estate plan. Lucas's power of attorney officially void. The forged will thrown out. The deed transfers reversed. The court recognized my original estate plan, and more importantly, it recognized me, not as some feeble old man to be manipulated, but as a father who never stopped protecting what mattered. Ella's name had been restored in full. Co-executor. Beneficiary. Steward. We signed a new will that same week. Tobias drew it up, simple and clean, no room for manipulation. But I added something Margaret would have wanted, something I should have done long ago. After everything Lucas pulled, it would have been easy to cut him out completely. Ella even expected it. But revenge doesn't build legacies. It just burns them. So I left him a letter. Not money. Not land. Just a letter. It said, You were born into this with open hands. But you closed them around things that weren't yours. And when you did, you lost more than land. You lost trust. If you ever find your way back to being someone your mother would have recognized, there might still be something worth salvaging. But not this. This house is for the ones who showed up when it counted. The rest of the new will follow Margaret's values. Ella would inherit the house and 50 acres outright. The remaining 10, the wooded patch Margaret used to walk through with her binoculars and notebook, I left to the local shelter where she volunteered every week for 15 years. She always said, land should serve more than just the people who own it. So now it will. Ella and I visited the shelter a few days later. It was nothing fancy, a small ranch house retrofitted into an office, a few kennels out back, some walking trails. But they were doing good work. Helping women and kids find their feet. Feeding folks who had nothing but the clothes on their backs. When I told the director about the land donation, she cried. I didn't expect this, she said. Neither did I replied. But it feels right. That night, Ella and I sat on the back porch and watched the sunset over the ridge. The trees were starting to turn. The air was sharp with the edge of autumn. She poured 2 glasses of wine and toasted without saying a word. We didn't need to. The house was quiet now. Not empty, just still. No buzzing crypto rigs. No strangers walking through the hall. No business meetings in the barn. Just a creaky old floorboard in the hall, the hum of the fridge, the wind brushing the screen door. Peace. It doesn't come loud. It doesn't shout. It just arrives. Lucas never showed up in court again. Never called. Never apologized. His GoFundMe went offline, his motel room emptied, and last I heard, he was trying to launch another startup out of a storage unit in Louisville. I didn't follow up. Because some things, once buried, should stay buried. This house doesn't carry his weight anymore. It carries mine. Ella's. Margaret's. I walk the property every morning. Check the fences. Feed the barn cats. Listen to the wind in the leaves and the birds overhead. I even started a little garden again, nothing major, just tomatoes, beans, squash. Ella helps on weekends. She's looking at buying the land behind the north field now, thinking about maybe building a guest house or starting a community kitchen. She told me, I want this place to mean something. To someone other than us. I smiled. It already does. Sometimes I still find little reminders, a photo tucked into a book, a note in Margaret's handwriting, a bit of glitter from that popsicle stick frame Ella made all those years ago. And when I do, I don't feel sad. I feel remembered. Because in the end, that's all any of us want, isn't it? Not to be rich. Not to win. But to be seen. To be known. To be named and not forgotten. This house, this land, this life, it's not perfect. It's patched and worn and battle-scarred. But it's mine. And now. It's finally at peace.